Master Anatomy and Physiology with Indramani Pandey.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to my another lecture regarding connective tissue. In last lecture, we talked about epithelial tissues. We talked about different types of epithelial tissues, their locations, right? And we talked about their functions, okay? And we talked about their general structure also. So in today's lecture, we're going to focus on another important type of tissue in human body, not only human body, but other mammals too. That is a connective tissue. Connective tissue, by its name, it means it trying to connect two structure together, or two or more structure together. So that's why it is called as a connective tissue. Now it's your time to give me the name for this figure. Can you identify this figure from your previous knowledge? I want to check that. What do you think? What is this figure about? Just take a time. Okay, no more time. So that's it. This is a blood. What do you think about this? Did you get it? It's an osseous tissue or bone tissue. And what about this? I think this is a cartilage, a type of cartilage. There are different types of cartilage, but don't worry, just say cartilage. I'll be fine. I'll be happy. You will be happy. Okay. So that's what it is. So now let's move on to the another slide that will give you the answer for this. Okay. As you can see here, I mentioned you this is about blood, this is bone tissue, this is hyaline cartilage, a type of cartilage. But don't worry if you don't get the answer, you will be fine. When you finish the series of lectures about connective tissue, you will be very proud yourself that you can identify these things by looking on the slide, okay, or looking at the microscope. Okay, so today's main purpose of this lecture is to introduce connective tissue, different types of connective tissue like branches. Okay, only I'm going to introduce connective tissue today. I'm not going to go in depth about what each category means, and I'm not going to describe the structure, function, and location. I'm not going to do like in detail today. I'm just going to go like over the top, like over the layer, like just the surface knowledge that you need to understand before we dive into the topic. Okay, now next slide is about the function of epithelial tissue. As you know, in anatomy, when you're talking about function, it depends upon the location, right? So for example, the connective tissue has different functions like supports, protects, and the binding other tissues together and providing insulation and helping in transportation and storing different substances. So that's the function of the connective tissue. But these connective tissue, as you can see here, supports. What do you think about that? Maybe the bone takes place here, right? So bone might be here, bone. The protects maybe also bone, right? Binds other tissue together. What might be that? Can you look here and can you figure out that? What can bind here? I know that there is no exact answer here, but you can just infer what can bind together. What do you think about ligament? Uh, what do you think about ligament? Okay, and what do you think about tendons? Okay, these are the things that bind tissues together. Okay, what about insulation? What can you see here? What can you see here? Can you see anything here? Yes, you can see adipose tissue. Adipose tissue are fat tissue that provide you insulation. What about transportation? Transportation depends on blood. Blood transports nutrients, gases, right? Different types of organic and inorganic molecules, right? What about storing? Storing also this adipose tissue. It stores fat as an energy form, right? So that's why we need to have the basic understanding of each type of connective tissue to get the whole function. The function of connective tissue depends upon the individual component of connective tissue, or not the component but individual types of connective tissue. So that's how we infer these things together, and we have a general understanding of functions of connective tissue in a bigger picture. So in a next slide, what I'm going to show you is how connective tissue is distributed in a whole body. That's the important thing we need to understand. Remember that the connective tissue is not distributed equally to all part of the body. Okay, there are like the proportions of the connective tissue varies in different parts. For example, if you're talking about skin here, in the skin you have a primarily you have a connective tissue. Okay, you have a primarily connective tissue here, but in the case of brain, you do not have connective tissue all over, right? So only the connective tissue you can find in the brain is the meninges, where you have a dura mater, arachnoid, and the pia mater. These layers of the meninges are made up of connective tissue. And if you look this figure, this is a figure from abdomen. In abdomen, what you need to know is organs are suspended by a membrane, which is called a mesentery. And that mesentery, this mesentery is supported by the connective tissue. And in abdominal region, you can also find adipose tissue, uh, and that adipose tissue usually store fats. Okay, so that's the general understanding we need to have. So from this slide, what you need to know is connective tissue is not distributed equally. It is not a 1-to-1 type of ratio. No, it is not like that. It is distributed according to the demand of the body. It is distributed according to the necessity in different parts of the body. Okay, so that's what you get from this slide. Now let's move on to the another slide. Okay, so what are the very important facts we need to about connective tissue? Remember that connective tissue is the most abundant and the widely distributed tissue in the body. You can find connective tissue everywhere. You can find blood everywhere, right? Except some few places, but most of the places. Okay, what about bones? What do you think about bones? Uh, can you imagine your life without bones? So the distribution of bones, think about that. Distribution of cartilage, think about that. So that's why it is the most abundant and widely distributed type of tissue. And another is the origin. The origin of the connective tissue is the mesenchyma. Um, the mesenchyme, what is this? Mesenchyme is an embryonic tissue from where connective tissues arise. Okay, and the connective tissue are made up of like non-living matrix, which includes fibers and ground substances. Plus, I forgot to include other types of other cells also. There are other type of cells you can find in the connective tissue also. And remember that connective tissue has varying degree of vascularity. That means the blood supply to the connective tissue is different for different types of connective tissue. Some connective tissue do not have the supply of blood. They totally depend upon the diffusion. There is no direct supply from the vascular system. For example, the cartilage, which is a example of an avascular type of connective tissue, but other tissues are somewhat supplied by the blood, and some of them are rich supplied with the vascular system. Now, the connective tissues are classified mainly in 5 categories, as you can see here. So the first one we're going to talk about is the loose connective tissue, then dense connective tissue, and the cartilage. There are 3 types of cartilage, okay? And we're going to talk about bone, which is osseous tissue, and we're going to talk about liquid connective tissue, which is the blood and the lymph. As you can see here, the branching diagram here, as you can see, the connective tissue here is divided into a connective tissue proper, cartilage, bone, and lymph and the blood. But you did not see loose connective tissue and the dense connective tissue here, because these are the part of the connective tissue proper. So look here, loose connective, dense connective. We just like further categorizing for easier purpose, we just categorizing in fewer terms so that we can understand their structure, function, and the location. So that's why it is important to categorize different things together. Okay. So from this, what you're gonna get is connective tissue as classified here, as you can see in the 5, but you can further arrange them and just make them like this way. Okay. But we're gonna focus on each of them in detail. Now, the connective tissues are made up of different types of elements or components on it. As I mentioned, you ground substances. There are 3 types of fibers like collagen, elastic, and reticular. For your purposes, the collagen fibers are the thick one, elastic fibers are also, you can see here, maybe it is given on the picture, you can see here, but you can I'm gonna give you the better understanding of that in more detail in future lecture. But just look the picture, just think about that. There are three types of fibers present in the connective tissue, and there are two types of cells, blasts and the sites. Blasts are the immature type, and the sites are the mature type. Blast cells measure into sites. Okay, that's what we need to understand. Okay, from this slide. So just understand that connective tissues have three components on it: ground substances, fibers, and the cells. Okay, now the ground substances actually they fills the space between cells, and remember that these are composed of different types of interstitial fluids and cell adhesion proteins and proteoglycans. What the interstitial fluid can have water on it and different types of inorganic and organic components on those, but the cell adhesion proteins, basically the fibronectin and laminin, these are the two main cell adhesion protein you can find in the ground substances. And remember that the proteoglycans, when they combine with GAGs, which is glycosaminoglycans, now what they do is basically they can go together. They bind with each other, and the GAGs is basically a like chondroitin sulfate and the uh, hyaluronic acid, and it is a combination of that. And remember that when you have higher GAGs, glycosaminoglycans, when you have higher level of that, you're going to have higher viscosity of the ground substance. And if there is a higher viscosity, what do you think about diffusion? Okay, that's you have to think about that. If you have a higher viscosity, is the diffusion going to be fast or slow? Does diffusion of substance depend on ground substances? So you need to understand that. You need to understand the importance of viscosity. You know this sign, the N sign, right? Think about that. Okay, so diffusion, what happens? Okay, that's your job. More viscosity will resist different particles to move easier. So that's the hint I give you. So other things you need to figure out. Okay, now, so there are, as I mentioned, there are three different types of fibers: collagen, elastic, and the reticular fiber. Collagen fibers are made up of collagen protein. They are extremely tough, and they actually provide high tensile strength, and they usually resist the pulling force. For example, if we have, like, let's say, okay, this is a rope in is tied in two walls. These are like one wall and two wall, and this rope is like a collagen. Okay, when you're trying to pull this apart, this rope, what it's trying to do is it resists that pulling force. Okay, so that's the function of collagen. It is very thick, and it is usually present in bone, cartilage, tendons, and ligaments. Another is elastic, made up of elastin protein. Elastic means we can stretch it. Okay, so highly elastic and stretch in response of tension. If you just pull the, okay, if the initial rope was this, right, this is a wall and this is a rope, right, and if you pull this thing, it's going to stretch, and it's going to reach here. So it has elastic nature on it. It is usually present in skin, lungs, and blood vessels. So why in lungs? Because the alveoli try and expand, right? Elasticity is important there. Blood vessels, pressure of the blood, think about that. If the pressure increases and the vessels did not respond to that, did not change its diameter, what's going to happen? Think about that. And the last one is reticular, which is usually made up of type 3rd collagen. And some people say like it is made up of reticulin protein. The reticulin protein is type 3rd collagen, so it is slightly tough, not like collagen, and it usually forms a soft skeleton or stroma to support other cell types in the connective tissues. Those cell types usually WBCs, mast cells, and macrophages. As you know, macrophages are the big eaters, right? And the locations are lymphoid organs like lymph nodes, bone marrow, and the spleen. Okay, that's what we got from the reticular. So you need to understand what each of them made up of, and their function and their location. Okay, that's important for you to understand. Now, as I mentioned you that we can classify loose connective tissue and dense connective tissue under the heading of connective tissue proper, right? So, as you know, loose connective tissue has areolar, adipose, and reticular. Um, Remember that reticular tissue, and don't be confused with reticular fiber, okay? So this is a tissue, because reticular tissue, because it has a reticular fiber, too much reticular fiber. So remember here, areolar tissue, adipose tissue, and the reticular tissue. This is a loose connective tissue. Why loose? Because these are not tightly packed, they are loosely arranged. Dense connective tissue, dense regular, you can look the regular pattern here. Dense irregular, which is running different directions. Elastic, looks like a rubber band, right? So I don't know, I don't want to mention now here, but just think about that, okay? And the types of the connective tissue proper are areolar, adipose, reticular in the case of loose. In the dense is dense regular, dense irregular, and elastic. That's what we need to understand. And in next lecture, what I mentioned you is I'm going to talk about connective tissue proper in depth, and I'll mainly focus the loose connective tissue. I'll talk about the structure or description about areolar function, location, similar to a similar way the adipose and the reticular, and I'll compare these all three together so you can have better understanding how you're going to distinguish each of those and what are the functions of each of them. Do they actually work together, or they have a different functions from each other? So we're going to focus on that in detail in lecture. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye bye.
Please subscribe to see more videos regarding anatomy and physiology.